Imagine walking into the basement of a museum and finding an object that shouldn't exist. An object that breaks the timeline of history. This actually happened in 1938. Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist, was looking through dusty boxes in the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad. He wasn't looking for treasure. He was cataloging junk. But then, he picked up a small, nondescript clay jar. It was about 14 centimeters high, yellowish, and looked totally boring. But Koenig looked inside, and what he saw made him freeze. Inside the clay jar was a cylinder made of copper, and inside the copper cylinder was an iron rod. The iron rod was suspended in the center, held in place by asphalt, bitumen, so it wouldn't touch the copper. Koenig was an archaeologist, but he also knew basic physics. He looked at this setup, copper, iron, an electrolyte container. He realized with horror that this wasn't a vase. It wasn't a religious idol. It was a galvanic cell, a battery. But here's the problem. This jar was dated to the Parthian or Sassanid period, roughly 2,000 years ago. History tells us that Alessandro Volta invented the battery in 1800. So, if history is correct, what is a battery doing in ancient Iraq, 2,000 years before electricity was invented? Koenig published his findings, claiming that ancient people knew about electricity. The scientific world laughed at him. They said it was impossible. They said it was just a scroll holder for papyrus. But Koenig argued back. Why would you seal a scroll with asphalt? Why would you put copper and iron together if not to create a chemical reaction? The design is perfect for electron flow. If you pour an acidic liquid, like grape juice or vinegar, into this jar, the electrons will flow from the iron to the copper. That is physics. Physics doesn't care what year it is. So, did ancient Babylonians have electricity? And if they did, were they lighting up their cities while the rest of the world was in darkness? The discovery was shocking, but it was just the beginning. Because when scientists finally decided to test Koenig's theory, the results were even more terrifying than the jar itself.
For decades, the Baghdad Battery was treated as a joke, a coincidence. Mainstream archaeology refused to accept it. But you can't argue with physics. After World War II, a replica of the battery was built by General Electric engineer Willard Gray. He didn't use modern chemicals. He used only what the ancients had: copper sulfate, vinegar, and grape juice. He connected the wires. He poured in the liquid, and the needle on the voltmeter moved. It worked. The ancient jar produced roughly half a volt of electricity. Later, the famous show Mythbusters took this challenge. They linked 10 of these jars together. The result? They generated over 4 volts of power. That is enough to charge a small device or power a small light. Think about the implications of this. We are taught that the past was dark, lit only by fire. We are taught that electricity is a modern miracle. But here we have physical proof that 2,000 years ago, someone in Baghdad understood the principles of electrochemistry. This wasn't accidental. You don't accidentally put an iron rod inside a copper cylinder and seal it with asphalt. This was engineered. But this brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? Why would a civilization in the desert need a battery? They didn't have phones. They didn't have light bulbs, or did they? Skeptics say, okay, maybe it makes electricity, but it's useless. Half a volt is nothing. But they are missing the point. A single battery is weak, but if you connect them in a series, you get power. And there is one theory that suggests this power was used for something magical, something that made kings look like gods. We are talking about the art of electroplating. Have you ever wondered how ancient jewelry looks so perfect? How they coated base metals with thin layers of gold without modern technology? The answer might be hidden in these jars. And if this theory is true, then the magic of the ancient world wasn't magic at all. It was science.
Okay, so we have a jar, we have copper, iron, and acid. We have electricity. But the million-dollar question remains, what on earth were they doing with it 2,000 years ago? They didn't have light bulbs. Or did they? To understand the purpose, we have to stop thinking like modern engineers and start thinking like ancient magicians. The most compelling scientific theory is electroplating. This is the process of using electricity to transfer a thin layer of one metal onto another. Today, we use it to make cheap jewelry look expensive. But in the ancient world, this ability would have been godlike. In the late 1970s, Dr. Anna Egebrecht, a director at a German museum, decided to prove this wasn't just a theory. He built an exact replica of the Baghdad Battery. He filled it with freshly pressed grape juice, a weak acid available to anyone in ancient Mesopotamia. Then, he connected the battery to a gold cyanide solution. He dipped a small silver statue into the solution. The result was instant history. Within 2 hours, the silver statue was coated in a brilliant, flawless layer of gold. Think about the economic implications of this. In the ancient bazaars of Baghdad or Babylon, gold was the ultimate currency. If a blacksmith could take a cheap copper or silver bracelet, hook it up to a few magic jars hidden in his back room, and turn it into gold, he wasn't just a craftsman. He was a counterfeiter. He was printing money. This explains why these batteries might have been kept secret. It wasn't just technology. It was a trade secret that could destabilize the economy. But there is a more mystical possibility. Religion. Imagine you're a pilgrim entering a dark, smoky temple 2,000 years ago. The priest tells you that the statue of the god has the power to heal or to punish. He invites you to touch the metal statue. Behind the scenes, hidden behind a curtain, a series of 20 Baghdad batteries are wired together. You reach out, trembling, and touch the idol. Zap! You feel a sharp, tingling shock. You pull your hand back in terror. You don't know what voltage is. You don't know what amperage is. To you, that statue is alive. The priest has just proven the power of the gods using simple electrochemistry. This is what Arthur C. Clarke meant when he said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And this brings us to the most controversial theory of all, the Dendera light. If we travel from Baghdad to Egypt, to the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, we find something impossible carved into the stone walls. Mainstream archaeologists tell us these carvings depict lotus flowers and snakes. But look closely. The lotus looks exactly like a giant glass bulb. The snake inside it wiggles just like a filament wire. The bulb is supported by a jed pillar, which looks remarkably like a modern high-voltage insulator. And crucially, there is a cable, a physical wire, running from the bulb to a box. If the Baghdad Battery existed, could it be the power source for these lights? Skeptics scream, "No!" They say the voltage is too low. A single jar produces only 0.5 volts. You would need dozens, maybe hundreds of them wired in series to power a primitive arc lamp. But is that impossible? We know the Egyptians were master engineers. If they could build the pyramids, could they not wire a few jars together? Imagine the interior of the pyramids. They are pitch black, yet there is no soot on the ceilings from torches. How did the artists paint those intricate murals in total darkness without fire? Mirrors? Maybe. Or maybe they carried the light of the gods, a glowing, buzzing electric lamp powered by clay jars. There is one final theory. Medicine. Long before modern painkillers, Roman doctors used electric torpedo fish to treat gout and headaches. They would literally slap a live electric fish onto a patient's head to numb the pain. It was primitive, wet, and smelly. Perhaps the Baghdad Battery was a cleaner, mechanical replacement, a portable pain relief device for the elite, a localized electric shock to treat arthritis. Whether it was for counterfeiting gold, shocking believers, lighting up tombs, or curing headaches, one thing is undeniable: the technology was there. The chemistry was working. But if they had this incredible power, why did the lights go out? Why did we forget?
If humanity unlocked the secrets of electricity 2,000 years ago, why did we spend the next 2 millennia living in the dark? Why didn't we have electric chariots in Rome? Why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen in ancient Persia? This is the tragedy of lost knowledge, and it is the scariest part of the story. We tend to view history as a straight line of progress. We think we are smarter than our ancestors. We think technology only moves forward. The Baghdad Battery proves that history is not a line. It is a cycle. Civilizations rise, they discover incredible things, they reach a peak, and then they collapse. And when they fall, they take their secrets with them into the grave. Think about how knowledge was stored back then. It wasn't on the internet, it wasn't in millions of printed books. It was on fragile papyrus scrolls, or locked inside the minds of a few secretive priests and master craftsmen. If a guild of gold platers kept the battery a secret to protect their monopoly, the technology died with them. If a war wiped out the priesthood, the magic of the temple died with them. And then there are the great catastrophes. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is the ultimate nightmare of human history. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the collective brain of humanity, turned to ash in a single fire. Who knows what was in those scrolls? Maybe the blueprints for a steam engine, maps of the Americas, or the detailed schematic for a sophisticated electrical grid using Baghdad batteries? We will never know. The smoke of that fire choked human progress for 1,000 years. But we don't have to look back to ancient times to see how fragile history is. The story of the Baghdad Battery has a modern, tragic twist. The artifacts were housed in the National Museum of Iraq. But in 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, chaos broke out. Looters stormed the museum. Thousands of priceless artifacts, items that defined the cradle of civilization, were stolen, smashed, or banished into the black market. Among the chaos, the original Baghdad batteries disappeared. Some sources say they were returned, others say they are lost forever, sitting in the private collection of a billionaire who doesn't even know what they are. We rediscovered them in 1938, only to potentially lose them again in 2003. It is a poetic, cruel irony. It shows us that entropy is the rule of the universe. It is hard to build, but it is easy to destroy. So, what is the final verdict? Was the Baghdad Battery a fluke, a random accident? The odds of accidentally placing an iron rod inside a copper cylinder, isolating it with asphalt, and filling it with acid are virtually zero. This was a machine, it was engineered, it stands as a silent monument to human genius. It tells us that our ancestors were not primitive savages banging rocks together. They were brilliant, they were scientists. They looked at the world, saw the raw materials of the earth, and unlocked the power of the electron. This jar is also a warning. We look at our modern world, our skyscrapers, our internet, our AIN. We feel safe, we feel permanent. But imagine if a global catastrophe happened tomorrow. If the power grids failed, if the servers melted down, would our grandchildren know how to build a computer from scratch? Would they know how to generate electricity? Or would they look at a rusted iPhone in a museum 2,000 years from now, scratch their heads and ask, what was this shiny glass brick used for? Was it a religious idol, a jewelry box? The Baghdad Battery forces us to be humble. It reminds us that we are not the first to rise, and unless we protect our knowledge, we might not be the last to fall. The past is deeper than we think, and the future is not guaranteed. Thank you for watching.